Welcome to the final part of my DC Animated Universe reviews. The universe consists of many shows that are based on DC Comics and are all based in one universe. It was created by Bruce Timm, who is an absolute genius. I already talked about the other shows like Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, and Static Shock. Now I'm going to talk to you about the show that wrapped this universe up, Justice League. The series was actually split into two shows, Justice League, which ran for 2 seasons, and Justice League Unlimited, which ran for 3. So let's talk about Justice League first. Bruce Timm decided not to follow the stories from the comics, but to make his own. However, they did follow the origin story for the first 3 episodes of the series. Aliens come down to invade Earth, and 7 heroes rise to the challenge to defeat them, and decide to start a team of superheroes. But in the show, they switched Aquaman, who was already introduced in Superman the Animated Series, and I was a pretty big fan of, and they switched him for Hawkgirl, which is kind of disappointing because Aquaman's a badass and I just think Hawkgirl's not that interesting. But Aquaman did get a couple of appearances in the show and even got a pretty good backstory. But I wish they could have stuck to the same classic design that they used in Superman the Animated Series. The show Justice League also changed the Green Lantern from Hal Jordan, who is best known for Green Lantern in the comics, for John Stewart. I was sort of surprised they didn't choose Kyle Rayner, because he was also introduced in Superman the Animated Series, but he did make a couple appearances throughout the Justice League series. But I think I would have rather had him as the main Green Lantern, because I really like his character. But I guess the show is trying to be more diverse in gender and race, by adding another female and adding a black man to the team. But don't get me wrong, I like John Stewart a lot. John is a stern war vet, which makes for some good conflict because he uses war tactics when the rest of the team believes in playing it safe and not seriously hurting anybody. Now the other characters. We have Batman, who is straight out of his own show, which is just perfect, because Batman the Animated Series is one of the best representations of his character. He's once again voiced by Kevin Conroy, who hands down is the best Batman. The show starts off following Batman doing some detective work, which I was really happy about, because what better way to start the series than with my favorite character doing what he does best. It made some pretty dramatic design changes for him. In the first part of Batman the Animated Series, he was blue and gray. Then later they switched him to black and gray, with a cape change that sort of wrapped around him. And now in Justice League, they went back to the blue and gray, but still stick with the same cape. He also has pointier ears, more like Batman Beyond suit. So they really mixed up all the Batman characters, and came out with this one. I actually like it a lot because it's sort of reminiscent of the original Batman from the very first comic stories. Just like Batman, Superman came directly from his own show. Bruce and Clark's relationship was already established before in Superman the Animated Series. They were the only members that knew each other before the origin story. Unfortunately, they couldn't get Tim Daly to return for the voice of Superman. Instead, they got George Newbern. He did a pretty good job, but I preferred Tim Daly. They made some changes to Superman's design as well. They made him bigger and more buff, and one change I didn't really care for was adding lines on his cheeks to make him look older. I didn't really like this because this takes place a couple months after Superman the Animated Series, and Batman didn't age at all, so why did Superman age so much? Fortunately, they got rid of the lines after season 1 because the fans complained. Another thing the fans complained about was the fact that they made Superman look like a wimp. It's true that in his own show, they made him a little weaker, and they said that he could probably be killed without kryptonite. And that's good, because otherwise his show would have been very boring, because then he wouldn't have to struggle to win each battle, which really makes the story. But it didn't really work here because he's the powerhouse of the team. He can't be getting hurt as easily as the other members, who are much less powerful than he is. My favorite character other than Batman was the Flash. We met him in an episode of Superman the Animated Series. Flash is the comic relief, and he's hilarious. He delivers some of the best lines of the show. He's voiced by Michael Rosenbaum, who I'm a pretty big fan of for playing Lex Luthor on Smallville.
I am the villain of the story.
They chose to go with Wally West rather than Barry Allen, which I was happy about because Barry Allen is known to be a more serious character, when Wally is known for being a more funny and relaxed character. Flash is referred to a couple times throughout the series as the grounding aspect of the team. There was one story arc where the League fights an alternate universe of themselves that made themselves almost dictators in their own world, which was all triggered by the Flash's death. So he really grounds the team and makes sure they don't go too far on the dark side. One thing I was kind of bummed about was there was only one episode in 5 seasons that focused completely on Flash's character, and it was in the very last season. Every other character got loads of backstory in the first season, so why not Flash? Wonder Woman got a lot of backstory. They showed her home, Themyscira, which is an island that only women are allowed to set foot on. They show how she leaves to save Earth from the aliens in the origin episode, only to be banished from Themyscira by her own mother. It's well written, and is always interesting to see the conflict between her and her mother. And finally we have J'onn J'onzz, otherwise known as Martian Manhunter. He's an interesting character because he struggles with adapting to humanity. We learn that he's the only Martian left because the aliens that attacked Earth in the very first story arc attacked Mars and defeated them, and he was the only survivor. Bruce Timm himself said that these characters really aren't supposed to go together, so you can imagine how hard it was to write these stories and to balance them equally. And for the most part, I think they did a pretty good job. I wish they could have focused more on Flash, but other than that, they did well. I think they got progressively better at it throughout the first 2 seasons, and by the end of the second season, it did it flawlessly. The team works out of a really cool watchtower that orbits in space. That's every kid's dream as their hideout.
This watchtower will act as an early warning system for detecting other threats of invasion from space.
And it also has a fully stocked kitchen. Ice mocha?
Now the villains. With a team as strong as Justice League, it's a challenge to come up with villains that actually pose a threat to them. A lot of times they would make teams of villains, like the Injustice League. But in my opinion, I think these were the weakest episodes. I like the episodes that really focus less on the villains and more on the story. An example of this is a story arc called Legends. It's very creative and very well written. The team gets trapped in an alternate world where there are a group of heroes just like themselves. John Stewart, or Green Lantern, knew them to be comic book characters that he would read as a kid. It's also pretty cool to see the 50s-like heroes team up with modern-day heroes. It sort of parodies the old superhero shows and movies, which is great.
Justice Guild, roll call. Catman.
Black Siren.
Green Guardsman. Tom Turbine. The Streak.
This can't be real.
Tell me about it. I almost busted a gut during that roll call routine.
Here they don't focus so much on villains, but more on the hero's struggle and an interesting story. Another example of them focusing less on villains and more on story and character development is the season 1 finale called The Savage Time. It focuses on World War II, which is a bold move on the creators' part. They talk about Nazis, and even talk about Hitler, and even show Hitler on the screen. This would be risky to do it in an adult show, and to do it in a show that's aimed for kids is pretty ballsy. The main villain is Vandal Savage, but the episode doesn't revolve around Savage being the villain, but rather the struggles of war. It also adds science fiction and fantasy parts, with the time travel and obviously with the superpowers. We get to see the superheroes fight in World War II, which is just awesome. But I think one of the things that I liked most was seeing the Blackhawks, which is a comic series released during World War II. Another thing I liked was seeing John's ring run out of juice. So without the power of his ring, he has to fight next to real soldiers just like he used to when he was in the army. We see him struggle with not having the power he became so used to, and have to dig down to his roots and pull the modest soldier out again. It's stories like this that I find to be the most memorable episodes, rather than just watching a giant beatdown. But don't get me wrong, some beatdowns are pretty entertaining too. I think that the best one was Superman vs. Darkseid, because it had been built up since the finale of Superman the Animated Series. Many villains from the Batman and Superman shows make appearances. Lex Luthor is probably the most reoccurring villain. Once again, he's voiced by Clancy Brown, who is the perfect Lex Luthor. As I said in my Superman review, he's the Kevin Conroy for Lex Luthor in my opinion. They did some interesting things with Lex, probably the most interesting being that he gets blood poisoning from carrying kryptonite in his pocket for years, and is told he has very limited amount of time to live.
Price is no object.
I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. It's terminal.
The Joker made an appearance in a great episode called Wild Cards. Mark Hamill returns as the voice of Joker, and is brilliant as always. This is actually the last time the Joker ever makes an appearance in the DC animated universe, and this plot mirrors the very first episode he was ever in the second episode of Batman the Animated Series, where he ran a television show. In this episode, the Joker buys airtime for all the networks, which in itself is pretty funny. Then he makes the Justice League find an armed bomb, along with 26 fake ones in Las Vegas. Harley Quinn also makes an appearance by the Joker's side, and is once again voiced by Arlene Sorkin, who is the one and only Harley Quinn. The Royal Flush Gang also made an appearance, and one thing that's really cool and kind of funny is each member of the gang is voiced by one of the Teen Titans cast. One thing I was disappointed about in the show was they didn't have more Batman villains. He has, in my opinion, the best rogues gallery in all of DC, and possibly in all of comics, so I don't know why they didn't put that to more use. Another thing about the villains that I was disappointed about was there was no Deathstroke. He's fought countless DC heroes, and is part of many DC characters' rogues gallery, so he'd be perfect for the show. I think that my favorite addition to the DC animated universe's villains was Grodd. mainly because of where he came from. He was a fugitive in a place called Gorilla City, which is hidden from humanity and is a city full of gorillas that are far more advanced and much more intellectually superior to humans. It's sort of like Planet of the Apes, which is one of my favorite movies, which is probably the reason why I love the episode so much. Another great episode was called A Better World. I talked about it before. This is where the Justice League goes up against an alternate timeline of themselves. The alternate Justice League have turned into dictators and call themselves the Justice Lords. In the other universe, Lex killed Flash, which led to Superman killing Lex, who was the president, which makes them by default dictators. It's a very interesting concept. I love how Batman interacts with the other Batman.
There are mercury switches at your hands and feet. Any motion, and I'll know about it.
You've thought of everything.
No. Just everything you'll ever think of.
The episode kind of reminds me of an episode from Superman the Animated Series called Brave New Metropolis. Lois falls into an alternate timeline where she died, which pushed Superman to become a dictator. He changed his suit to black just like the Justice Lords did, but the Justice League episode is much better written in my opinion, and goes deeper into the story and the characters than Superman the Animated Series did. Towards the end of Season 2, we finally see John and Shiera, or Hawkgirl, kiss. I think that they handled their relationship really well. They built it up very slowly. They threw in some lines that really made them step back and really look at each other differently.
You don't care about me.
What are you talking about? I'd give my life for you.
Another really great part about this relationship is right before they kiss, John takes Shiera's helmet off for the first time, and we finally see her face. Throughout the past 2 seasons, I always felt she wasn't anything special. She was a warrior who was strong and didn't let anybody push her around. In no way did I think of her as someone who could be attractive like Wonder Woman, but when John takes her helmet off, she's absolutely beautiful. I just found that really interesting, and felt that they handled that very well. For the Season 2 finale called Starcross, we learned that Shiera lied about who she was. She said that she was the last of her kind from Thanagar, but in the beginning of the 3-part finale, people from Thanagar come to Earth. We find out that their leader is Shiera's fiancé, which is a big blow for John. The Thanagarians lie to Earth and say that they're protecting them from a threat, and in reality, there was no threat. They were just using them, and once they were done, Earth would be destroyed. The episode shows a lot of conflict inside Shiera, because she has to choose between the Justice League and Thanagar. This also affects Shiera and John's romantic relationship a great deal, and things are never really the same between them throughout the rest of the series. My favorite part of this story arc, though, is when the team has to blend into society because the Thanagarians are looking for them. We see them all take off their masks for the first time.
Hold on a second here. What about the whole secret identity thing? I mean, I trust you guys, but I'm not sure I'm ready to...
Wally West, Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne.
Show off.
This episode also develops Batman and Wonder Woman's relationship. They hinted at this a couple times, but here they actually kiss.
Sorry.
Don't be.
One thing I really loved is when the team all meets up at Bruce's house. We follow Wally and John as they ring the doorbell. Then Alfred comes to the door and walks them in. Then we see the rest of the team already there in the Batcave. There's just something about this scene. We know Wayne Manor like the back of our hand because of Batman the Animated Series. That's like having a friend over as a kid. Your friends you know from school finally see the house you're so familiar with. I'm sure that the writers did that on purpose, and it works really well.
Hey, that's a giant dinosaur.
And I thought Batman was the detective.
Starcross was a really great episode. It had humor, romance, tragedy, and left you wondering what was going to happen next. And it also set it up so that everything would change for the next season.
Great. No Hawkgirl, no Javelin, no Watchtower. What's gonna happen to the League now?
Season 3, or I guess you could say Season 1, since technically this is the start of the sequel series, Justice League Unlimited. But most people consider it just to be one show, so we're going to say Season 3. Everything has changed. The team is no longer just 7 members, they're now dozens of heroes. They have characters that made brief appearances in the first 2 seasons of Justice League, and in other DC Animated Universe shows, like Dr. Fate, Orion, or Steel, and some completely new characters as well. It's fun to just pause it and see which heroes you know and recognize. The season started off following Green Arrow, who was one of my all-time favorite heroes. He even used his famous boxing glove arrow. So I was happy that they added him to this universe, and to have him in the show. All of the 7 members return except for Hawkgirl. John no longer goes out to fight, but stays in the Watchtower, and he gives out missions and assignments, and make sure everyone is okay. Supergirl is not part of the League as well. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't let Nightwing or Batgirl or even Robin join. Superman's cousin gets to join, but not the Bat family? What the hell? Although Nightwing did make the smallest appearance possible. He's hidden in the shadows once Black Canary crosses into Bloodhaven, which is Nightwing City. They couldn't have made him more visible? I honestly wouldn't have even noticed him if I didn't read it online. Another thing I was disappointed about was that there wasn't enough Flash, who was my second favorite character of the show. He didn't have any lines in the third season. The first real appearance he had was in the second episode of season 4 called The Ties That Bind. And that was probably my least favorite episode of the whole show because of Granny Goodness, who replaces Darkseid. As I said in my Superman review, she's just an awful character. She's uninteresting and is gross. She's played by Edward Asner. I don't know why they chose to go with a man to play her because it didn't work at all. I just found it to be weird and annoying. We finally get to see the Flash, and it's in the worst episode of the series. But considering the fact that my second favorite character is in the episode, and I still hate it, really shows how bad it is. But a character addition that I really liked was The Question. I'd never heard of him until this show, and now I love him. He reminded me a lot of Rorschach from Watchmen. He was my favorite character of that series. He's a detective who wears a mask, and feels naked without it. I also really liked his relationship with Huntress. There was one episode called Double Date. Here there's a competition between the two new couples, the Huntress and The Question, and Green Arrow and Black Canary, whose relationship I also really liked a lot.
And here I heard you're some kind of brilliant fighter. You heard right.
There were also some really great episodes in this season. I think this season was the strongest season when it came to individual episodes, but as a whole I think season 4 is the strongest, but I'll talk about that later. One of my favorite episodes of season 3 was called Kid Stuff. This in my opinion is the funniest episode of the series. Batman, John, Wonder Woman, and Superman have to turn into kids to stay in the universe because Mordred put a spell on all the adults to make them vanish from Earth. It's hilarious just listening to them talk. And to see these big muscular heroes with deep voices turn to scrawny little kids with high-pitched voices is just great.
This better be temporary. You sound weird. Whoa, so do I. I kind of like this.
Dakota Fanning voices young Wonder Woman, which is pretty cool because I really like her. I would not have guessed that she would be in a show like this, but I think she does a really great job. You can tell that a lot of thought went into this episode, and it pays off very well.
I changed my mind. I'll go with Bruce, and John can go with Clark. Whatever.
What's with them? Man, for somebody with like 50 different kinds of vision, you are so blind.
One of the weirdest episodes of the series was in season 3. And was called Little Piggy. It's probably on my top 10 favorite episodes just because it's so out there. Wonder Woman gets turned into a pig. Batman has to find a way to reverse the spell. This episode shows a lot about the relationship between Batman and Wonder Woman.
You and her. Are you two?
Just good friends.
No. You and I are just good friends. There's something more between you and Diana.
This episode also has Zatanna, who we met in Batman the Animated Series. But the weirdest part of this episode is when Batman sings on stage. I never thought this would happen. And Kevin Conroy, who voices Batman, is actually a pretty good singer.
Ain't these tears in my eyes telling you I was your only one?
I think the thing that made this episode so great was how different it was compared to the other episodes. So it really stands out, but it still has that same Justice League feel to it. The best episode of the series took place in season 3. It was a two-parter called The Once and Future Thing. It was the season 3 finale. Batman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern are chasing somebody through time using a time machine. Part 1 was called The Weird Western Tales. Jonah Hex makes an appearance, which I was really happy about, because he doesn't really get enough credit compared to the other DC characters. But Part 2 is what made this story arc so great. They travel into the future in 2040, which is the time that Batman Beyond took place. So Bruce meets his older self.
Surprised to see me? A little. I'm more surprised that I lived so long.
Batman, Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, Batman. Or have you met?
Not now!
John finds out that his son, Warhawk, who we met in the Batman Beyond episode, is his and Shiera's son. We also see Static as an old man. This is the one time where all of the DC Animated Universe shows intertwine. It's great to see all of the future and past characters interact. And they also throw in some really funny things like Bruce and old Bruce playing good cop and bad cop.
I can't control my friend here much longer. You better give us something we can use.
Wow. Batman playing good cop.
Everything's relative.
It's an awesome episode, and it's probably my favorite of the series. As I said before, Season 3 is the best when it comes to individual episodes, but Season 4 is the best overall. This season is what is referred to as the Cadmus Arc. It spans over the course of 8 episodes, and slowly builds up the war between a secret part of the government called Cadmus and the Justice League. Cadmus is run by a stone-faced woman named Amanda Waller. Cadmus is concerned that since the Justice League recruited so many new members, they're way too powerful and have to be stopped. This arc goes back to the series finale of Superman the Animated Series, where Darkseid took control of Superman and wreaked havoc all over Metropolis. Amanda recruits Lex Luthor, mainly for the money, General Wade Island, and Dr. Hamilton, which is a shock when you see it in the beginning of the first episode of the arc. He was one of the main characters in Superman the Animated Series. He was a big help to Superman, and he made him gadgets and answered his science questions. So to see him betray Superman was a shock. He too was scared because of what Superman did in the finale of the show. This arc is so well written. There's really no clear bad guy or good guy. You root for both sides at different times, and you can understand why Cadmus is doing what they're doing.
You've got a spaceship floating over our heads with a laser weapon pointing down. In another dimension, 7 of you overthrew the government and assassinated the president. We're the good guys.
They're terrified of the Justice League, which makes us see the Justice League in a different light. Even Batman starts to question what they're doing.
Passing judgment like gods, with our superpowered army and our orbiting death ray. Cadmus is right to be scared.
But I think there's a thing that made us see the Justice League differently was in an episode called Clashed. Captain Marvel is introduced for the first time in the DC Animated Universe. For those of you who don't know, he's a kid that can basically turn into a god. He gives a really powerful speech that really makes you think about the Justice League in a different way.
I idolized you. I wanted to be you. I guess I'm saying I like being a hero, a symbol. And that's why I'm quitting the Justice League. You don't act like heroes anymore.
In the episode, Lex is now running for president, which pisses Superman off a lot. Lex decides to make a town for underprivileged kids, and Superman didn't trust Lex, and came to the conclusion they was hiding a bomb underneath the town. And he fights Captain Marvel to get down to it, and in the process he destroys the whole town, which in itself is an awesome sequence. After all that, he finds out that the bomb was actually a generator to supply free energy to everyone in the town. One of the best episodes of the arc is called Task Force X. We follow some convicts who were recruited by Cadmus to break into the Watchtower and steal a weapon. It's a fascinating episode because you never really think about how much goes on the Watchtower other than the actual heroes. We see that they have to do their jobs to keep the place running. It's really well written because once again, you're rooting for the villains. One of the best parts of the episode was seeing how the convicts interact.
I almost lost it when this bonehead set off the metal detector.
75 cents is 75 cents. I'm supposed to throw away money?
We also, of course, root for the Justice League in an episode called Flashpoint, where Luthor takes control of the laser on the Watchtower and makes it look like the League blew up a Cadmus building. It all slowly builds up until the Justice League is arrested, and Cadmus sends out multiple groups of a group called the Ultimen, and they're all almost as powerful as the Justice League. And they're all led by a clone of Supergirl, and they do an assault on the Watchtower with the remaining members up there. Then there was a twist at the end that makes Cadmus and the Justice League have to team up. For hardcore comic book fans, we would have picked up on a hint that tells us what would happen at the end. The episode was called Panic in the Sky, which was also the name of a well-known comic about Brainiac. So at the end of the episode, Lex and Brainiac team up, which was set up all the way back in Season 2 of Superman the Animated Series, which I thought was pretty cool how they incorporated that in there.
Do you not recall my kidnapping you in this very building?
Yes.
Brainiac and Lex, or what I like to call them, Lexiac, have to be stopped by the original 7 members, which I thought was great because it's sort of a throwback to the original episodes. The Flash finally gets the recognition he deserves, and we see how powerful he really is. And that score is just so epic. There was much more to the story arc, but it's way too complicated to go that deeply into it without taking 10 minutes to explain everything. But that's my favorite part of the series, and really made Season 4 the best season in my opinion. Even though that episode was the last episode of the Cadmus Arc, there was still one more episode called Epilogue for the season finale. This is another one of the best episodes in my opinion. We watch Amanda Waller tell stories as an old woman to Terry McGinnis, who's Batman Beyond. We also learn what Terry is up to many years after the show took place. The best part of the story, in my opinion, was when Amanda was telling her stories about Bruce. One story was that Bruce sat with Ace while she was dying.
Could you stay with me? I'm scared.
He sat with her until her time came.
It shows a much more gentle, kind, and more sensitive side to Bruce that we rarely ever see. But he relates to Ace, which brings out his soft side.
I read your mind. That's how I knew you weren't going to use Mrs. Waller's weapon on me.
Another story Amanda tells Terry is about Project Batman Beyond. She created Terry so he could become the next Batman.
The thought of a world without Batman was unacceptable, so I decided to make a new one.
The Phantasm also makes an appearance, who we met in the movie that was connected to Batman the Animated Series called Mask of the Phantasm. The writers really went all out for this episode, mainly because they thought it was the final episode of the series, but the studio liked the season so much that they asked them for more. The final season. They didn't think that they would be making another season, and after having such an amazing season before this, how do you top that? And the answer is, you don't. But I still think that they did a great job on Season 5. The new threat in this season is the Legion of Doom, which is a team of supervillains all run by Grodd. There's also a struggle of power between Lex and Grodd, which is really interesting to watch. This season mostly focuses on Lex. We get some great character development for him. They had some great episodes in this season. One episode was called The Great Brain Robbery. This episode is special because Flash and Lex Luthor switch minds, and Michael Rosenbaum, who plays Flash, also plays Lex Luthor on Smallville. So here, he plays this show's Lex Luthor.
Lex, you're having a difficult day. If nothing else, I can at least learn the Flash's secret identity. I have no idea who this is.
Clancy Brown, who plays Lex Luthor on Justice League, gave a hilarious performance as well.
You gonna wash your hands? No, 'cause I'm evil.
Another great episode was called The Patriot Act. This episode focuses on the members of the League who don't have any superpowers. We get more character development to Vigilante and Shining Knight, both of whom I really like. We also get to see Speedy, who is now Red Arrow, who is Green Arrow's sidekick.
Ex-partner?
Sorry, ex-partner.
Oh, for a second I was all mad.
Hawkman also made an appearance in this season, but I wasn't a fan of how they handled it. They made him Shiera's stalker, who has been following her around for years, which I thought was kind of weird.
So he's a fan.
He's a stalker.
I was happy to see that they threw in Supergirl and Brainiac 5's relationship, which I really liked in the comics. I knew that it would be incredibly difficult to write into the show, so the fact that they did it, and they did it really well, made me really happy. And speaking of Supergirl, I really like the redesign of her character for Season 5. It makes her look a lot older, which is appropriate considering the fact that she becomes in a serious relationship. I never really liked her old outfit. It just didn't really feel like Supergirl. I mentioned this episode earlier, but I'll go into more detail. I really love the episode called Flash and Substance. This is probably my favorite episode of Season 5. It's 100% about the Flash, which is just awesome. I just wish it hadn't taken them this long to do it. It has 4 of his villains: Captain Boomerang, Mirror Master, Captain Cold, and the Trickster. They all team up to beat the Flash. It's really funny how Flash interacts with the villains.
Dude, as soon as you finish your drink, turn yourself in.
Got me again, Flash.
The episode shows the lighthearted, trusting side of Flash, and shows why everyone loves him so much.
The bad guys went down and nobody got hurt. You know what I call that? A really good day.
For the series finale, Darkseid made his return. He swears revenge on Superman and plans to destroy Earth. To stop him, the Justice League has to team up with the Legion of Doom. Then we see a rematch between Superman and Darkseid, which dates all the way back to the beginning of Season 2. Now the ending of the DC animated universe. I thought it was really well done. The final line is,
"And the adventure continues,"
which shows that even though the universe is over, they're still going to be fighting crime. Then all of the League members run down the steps, followed by the original 7, and ending with the zoom in of Batman, who we started the DC animated universe journey with. It was the perfect ending for the DC animated universe, which ran from 1992 to 2006, 14 years. All of these shows have been amazing to watch, and have set the groundwork for a lot of animated shows today. They show that you don't have to dumb down plots and have cheesy characters for animated shows, but can have plot twists, good character development, and can focus on real historical events to make a show that not only appeals to kids, but adults too. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed all of my DC Animated Universe reviews.